Okay, so we're set. Basically, what I want to start off with is thanks for putting up with me for the next little bit. See how we go. If you have questions, by all means ask. We'll go from maybe questions to answer, but first I really would like to take you through a very brief tour of Catalyst. And I wanted to start too with the basics. If I were to search in KB articles for a search, I'd come up with a whole bunch of articles, but I really want to focus on two of them. The one is the basics of Catalyst. This basically gives you a very quick tour of what it's all about. This is an outdated article, but the information is still pretty relevant and still current, a lot of it. And the other one is at the bottom of this one, and it's also numbered 105. You can click on here. And this one here tells you a lot about the flow, how clients go into the agency, what an admission is, and then the flow from a program to discharge. It also gives you status information. It talks about client flow, entry services, and also gives you a brief idea of what the client types are, or the activity types are. So that's where I wanted to go with this little piece here, just touching in on the Data's help desk where you can find information. Going to take us to Catalyst, and then you're already very familiar with this piece of logging in. You need 3 pieces of credentials. We're going into a test database. When you come in here, you see right away that you have information presented before you. You're given your password is to expire on what date. And if you have current items, this is all dependent on what you see is dependent on what your user privileges are and how you're set up with Catalyst. So as you know, Catalyst is a client database. Not everybody has the full capacity of what Catalyst can offer. Some agencies have a broader view and some people have a more narrow view. When I'm saying more narrow, I'm talking about the SSA only agencies that are just using Catalyst to access the GAIN ABS and the short screeners. So they're
what would they see, sorry?
They will see, they will see very minimal data. But they'll see this menu bar here. They'll always see the menu bar. But when they start doing this, they'll have a client search option, and they'll also have user profile option and a merged client option. They may not have the administration. They won't need access to the modules for activity log. So then you're looking at the broader expanse, agencies that, what's that? So then you have agencies with a broader outlook because they're accessing wait lists, they're accessing groups, they're doing some of the central access are going to have triage booking, they're going to have booking lists, and most of the 99% of our agencies will not see these two options here, booking list and triage. So it's how your Catalyst database is configured is depending on your needs. So when we look at this first, I can see that I have on my home page, you have referrals sent out. This tells me that I'm taking part in the e-referrals module, and you can sort of opt into that or you're not opting into it. And that's something that is set. We'll talk about the admin module in a second, but you can see that this first section here on your current items is, do you have e-referrals out, sending and pending, and do you have any e-referrals accepted or declines back? The next piece is on the wait list. How many clients are currently waiting for services? And each one of those are links that you can go access another screen and find out further details on these 3 components here. When it comes to the activity log, you have, of course, your add appointment screen. You have your activity list, which is going to list all your service providers and active service providers, and access to their a jump to screen for days on activities and all that. And batch entries, you can basically you add activities. You don't have to add one appointment at a time. You can add multiple appointments at one given time. There is a business rule attached to the batch entry. You cannot put entry services on here or groups. So basically, as I talked about earlier, business rules are dependent on what you can do and what you can't do. When it comes to reports, we have, again, user privileges set, and there's 2 stages to this. We give user report privileges, but then at the agency level, they will also have to set user privileges at that level. When it comes to the admin, we have 3 modules here. We have the administration models. This agency list here will list all the agencies that we are working with in the province. Agency program, that's localized to your agency. Basically, it gives you an idea of what programs you have in your database. Waitlist by program setup, if you're opting in to use the waitlist module, something that we have to first turn on at the database level. And they'll be given this option to set their, do clients wait for service, yes or no? If it's a yes, then they could probably set up a wait list for that. Agency activity list, this gives the agencies to add activities to be reflective in the activity log, and they would be linked to client services direct, indirect services, admin, those kinds of things. Agencies preferences, this is going to be expanded into something a little bit more. Case notes, basically they would set how long before case note can be edited in hours. CDS, EPYC is not going to be relevant to a lot of agencies. E-referrals can receive e-referrals, yes or no. If this is set to yes, the agency can opt into the e-referrals. Gain SS, MMS, OCAN, this is something that an OPOC would have to be set at the database level for one component of this, but the other component would be user privileges. Password reset monitor, yes or no, and whether they're doing the wait list or not. So this is one part of agency preferences. Selection list, another one. This is where they can go and add things to options on values for the selection list. Not everything in Catalyst is listed here. The only thing that are listed here are fields that have you can add or remove from. You can't add or remove from any required fields, so you're not going to see them listed here. And so then we come to our customization. This is basically an option for the agencies to add custom fields to certain screens. Sometimes they could be maxed out because if you only can have so many custom fields on per screen. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we have our participating agency selection list. And these are the lists of agencies that you're going to see on the outgoing referrals in the referrals module. Merge clients. Merge clients are basically when you have duplicates in your system, then you would basically be able to merge clients if there are no overlapping admissions. User profiles, you can search on users or you can search by one user. When you come in here, you see that they have a user ID, a username, active, or delete. If you see a no, this means to say the file was basically deleted. It's not deleted. It's basically hidden for use within the modules of Catalyst, with the exception of reports. If you want to cruise down and see, you could come, say if I were looking to adjust the user privileges of this one here. If I'm changing a user privilege on this screen here, I would have to first input my administrative password, and then I would basically select my change. Again, we're talking user privileges. Agency user is totally different from agency administrator. Agency administrators can see this change screen, and they can also see the next one for user privileges. if this person here, 353, were to log into their user profile, they would not have this added button at the bottom. They would not be able to manipulate their user privilege. They would basically be able to change their first name, their last name, and basically that's it, their email address. But anything that is related to admin, such as administration or user privileges, then they wouldn't be able to access that. For all the agencies that are interfacing with us, you would have no admin users, so you would never see this option of user privilege at the bottom. And that's done primarily because we have to keep the two databases in sync with one another. And if they were permitted to have user privileges on some screens, then that could change the dynamics of Catalyst and put the two databases out of sync. The user privileges here, you have basically programs. You have a list of inactive programs. If somebody has left the agency, they've inactivated the program, or they're old programs that need to, maybe there was a problem with not being able to terminate a program. They could actually go in here and activate a previous program that was previously inactivated and temporarily activate it, and then basically inactivate it again, just so that they can get in and make corrections on the screen. This here is a test database, so you know that the information that you're seeing here is not going to be typical to a normal agency. They wouldn't have all those activities and they wouldn't have all those programs. System modules, this is definitely an agency administrator option of setting user privileges. When you're an administrator, you would want to have access to almost anything here that you are able to, because you want to be able to support and direct any questions that come your way. If you see a certain area grayed out, such as OCAN or EPIC, that's because your agency doesn't have that option of using that module. Treat, if you provide someone access with Treat, that's EADAT tools, assessment tools. Once you check this and save the user privilege, they will have to wait for an overnight refresh before they have access to that module. Reports, this is a two-stage, as I noted before. You have to provide it first at the database level and then at the user level. So I'm not going to hang on here too long because I don't want to do that. I want to move on to clients. So say we have a client that's coming in and we want to search for this client. At one time, there used to be an add client button here, and we found that agencies were duplicating too many clients, and it really is not a good thing when you're tracking your statistics and user information. So we removed the add client button from this screen, and we gave agencies a better search tool. So say, for example, I know that the first name started with an M. I can check that because this here is the search is the first initial or part of a name. So you can search on part of a name. And then you can say, oh gee whiz, I know they were born 1971. So I can do a search on that. And here I got a hit on 2 matches. I'm matched on first and middle name or year, and we're matched. So I got 2 matches. You say, oh gee whiz, that's not the person that I was thinking. Maybe I was looking for somebody saying Higgins, but it sounds like Higgins, so I can do a SoundX search. And we get a sound hit on Higgins for this person here. When you do the SoundX search or a partial name search, if there's variations in the name, then you're not over likely to create a duplicate. So, for example, Martha was spelled with an M-A-T-A instead of an M-A-R-T-H-A. There's variations in different names that, could cause problems. So when you're doing a search, basically you can do a very minor search or if you fill in all of these fields here, you're going to end up having a very narrow search. But you do a broader search, you got less likely of creating a duplicate. So once you've done your search, you can do an add client. Client is not showing. We start with the site number. And if you were an SSA agency, basically an agency that is using Catalyst just to do the GAIN ABS, there's minimal data that we would want you to put in. That would be your first name, the last name, the gender, the date of birth, and address effective date. A postal code would be very helpful. When you've done that, basically you would click Save. As soon as you click Save, you're going to get added options on the bottom to access the GAIN ABS tools. That's basically where a GAIN ABS agency would stop. They wouldn't go on to admission data. They wouldn't bother to go on to programs. They're basically focusing on this one screen. To get beyond the screen, you would have to move into admissions. Like I said, GAIN ABS agencies would only need to put in minimal data set here and then save to get the access to the screeners and to the assessment. But say, for example, Bonnie is a new client of ours, and she's new to the agency, and we want to move her from pre-admission. Some people say pre-admission, some people say pre-entry, some people say entry services. Basically, it's the stage where the client has come. They've acknowledged that they would like to have a discussion and take their investigation to services a little bit further. So they're providing you with some information. We go through, we want to track all the required fields here. And we select our gender. Could be male, female, or other. We're going to go with female. And then we would start with, we note that there's no chart number here yet. We note that there is no data key. The data key is generated once this information is saved, and it's based on the first initial of the first name, the first initial of the last name at birth, their date of birth, and their gender. So we're going to start with putting in some information here. And this is helpful for tracking if you're doing some testing and you want to make sure that everything is, once the patch or the fix or the upgrade is done, that you can go back in and see that there's been no change, or the integrity of the data and the input is still correct. So I'm going to put in here CO, and I'm not sure what the name of this town is, so I'm going to do a search, and I'm going to say Cobble Hill. As soon as I hit click on, I can select, and once I do this, the county is going to populate. If I didn't do my search, the county would not populate, or if I did, let's take this out here. So say I'm looking for New York. Let's do a search. New York, was this the one I wanted? I can say yes, select, and then that's going to give me USA as the county. You're not going to get a county in here unless you do either a search or a click. Let's take that one out again. Let's go, let's see, Jones Falls. And if I go tap through here, I'm going to still get the county. If I had moved down my screen and just continued inputting, this one here would not populate, and you would have to come back and populate it before you'd be able to advance to the next screen. Postal code. Postal code is very important. It's one of our biggest data quality issues. So if it's no fixed address, this basically means that the client has no fixed address. They're homeless. If you don't know the postal code, you would put in unknown postal code. But it would be understandable that if you don't know the postal code, at some point you would come back, update the postal code, use the address effective which date, which will become a link, and link it to the client admission. There are KB articles on that. A lot of these fields here are not required, but the agency has them there. They're available for them to use. And there's a note section here. So basically, I filled in all the required fields for this this client. I can save. Right now I have some buttons at the bottom. I have save and put client on wait list. I have save. But this client has also provided me with, I've spent some time with this client collecting this information, and we've moved it a little bit further into the client's treatment by taking some admission information services. So I'm going to basically do some entry services for this client right here, right now, because I'm on the page and I want to be able to track this as opposed to running off and not tracking it later. So taking time right now, I'm taking a few minutes and I'm basically just going to complete the information. The client has no chart file number right now, but we do have first name, we have last name, and we have the number of minutes that we spent. This point we can do save. We can say save and go to case notes. We can do a case note for the client from the activity log and the client is not admitted. If we were to try to do a case note from the client information screen while the client is still at this very pre-entry level, we wouldn't be able to do it. But we can do a case note. So I could do a case note from this point here. So I'm just at this point, I'm just going to say save. The information has been saved. So now I'm going to exit the activity log. So now we have our client, we have all these added buttons. These buttons are going to be dependent on what privileges your agency has and what user privileges are associated with your account. So I can take a look and see my entry services. Oh, no, sorry, pressed the wrong button. Right here, there's a link, entry services. This shows me the information. So say, for example, I wanted to see this client tomorrow. I've tentatively booked him to come back in and see Roberta tomorrow. And Roberta is going to come in. She knows the client name, and she's going to come in and she can actually see a note that was put here, or she can see an entry services note. I can move into the gain assessment here. I can go into the ADAT tools. I can do a gain SS or an MMS. I can't do a POSIT because the client is of a certain age. The POSIT and the MMS are dependent on the date of birth of the client. Over and under 17, 18, if they've had their 18-year birth, birthday, then you're going to see a difference here. You'll see a POSIT for under and you'll see an MMS for over.
Can you explain POSIT MMS again, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the age thing about what POSIT and MMS?
Okay, we do have a KB article on that. So I'm not going to, because that is something that, like I said, I've done a KB article on this one. MMS, let's see. I thought I was going to be able to quickly find it. Right here. So basically, a lot of the times you may have the question like you did, Nida, but you may not have the answer. Oh, this is not the one I wanted. But if you know how to search for the answers, then you're already ahead of the game. Okay. SSA. I know I have a big KB on this one here. This is not very good use of my services right now, or yours. So let's go to another search. Let's go to the assessment tools, and I see SSA over here. Here we go, right here. So basically, this is a document that was created to help you move through the short screeners. And in here, it talks about the age. So for clients age 12 to 17, the POSIT button will be optional and not the MMS. For clients age 18 and above, the MMS button will be populated. So basically, when they say 17, the client has not had their 18th birthday yet, but say they're 317 and 364 days, they're going to see the POSIT. If they had that full 365 days, they're going to see the MMS. So it's dependent on the age, date of birth. And that's why it's for the MMS and the POSIT, you need to have the one of the required fields for the SSA only agencies is the date of birth. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect.
I wrote the KB down as well.
Pardon?
I wrote the KB number down as well.
Perfect. I should have put it here. What was it?
493.
493.
3.
Okay, so let's go on. So the admission list. So this client is new. They've never had any client admission. We see that we're on the admission list screen, and we see that the client is date of birth female, but had no previous admission. So I'm going to add an admission. Right now, the client still does not have a chart number. If this were an SSA only agency, the number would have been provided on the client information screen. But because they're not, we're going to move to the next stage. The client right now, we have to have the admission date. And if this were a residential agency, so they have clients that are coming there in bed, they would want to put in the time. Primary worker, this primary worker list is not the same as a Catalyst user account. The primary worker list is found, and you can populate it from the administration, selection list, maintenance, and you would add those those staff members' names through the caseworkers list. On this screen, it's called primary worker. In here, you would see it has a caseworker, and you would populate that list. It's not a required field, but if you use a name here, then what you're going to find when you run reports, you're going to see that name populated as admission. If you leave it blank, that's okay too. It's not required. It's referred on date. We're going to say the client referred on that same date. And we're walking through here now. Anything that you see with a red asterisk is required. There are exceptions though, and that exception is going to be based on your client type. The client type, if I were to select client at an alcohol, drug, or any of these here, those three here, you would have to go through, and anything that has a required field, red asterisk, you would have to populate it. If you were to select family member or non-MOH, meaning to say that they're not participating with DATAS for that program, say they're a mental health program, so they're not required to submit their data to us, then it could be we would consider it, it's not really non-MOH, but that's how we've labeled this type here. So for this case here, I'm going to say that the client is alcohol, drug, and gambling. So I'm going to have to go through, and I'm going to have to select required fields. Young offender is not applicable because the client has had their 18th birthday. And the relationship status, all of this we would try to fill in. And this information is collected at the time the client is admitted. So presenting issues, this is not a required field. This field is actually something that we pre-populate when we set up client databases, but the agencies can change it. They can basically add or remove this one here because it's not a required field. Anything that has a red asterisk, they're required fields. If I select alcohol here and I say that they did not use, then nothing happens down here. If I say that the client was using barbiturates, and barbiturates are a problem for that client, and they use 1 to 3 times monthly, then you see barbiturates are automatically populated in the next field. If you look to here, it says substances used in the past 12 months. This client did not use in the last 30 days, so it was did not use. Not that you really need to know all this, but alcohol was used in the last 12 months. So this is not so much, this here are the presenting problems. these are substances used in the last 12 months. So not necessarily would all the ones that are listed down here would appear up here, because we're looking at substances used in the last 12 months as opposed to substances that are presenting a problem for the client. I can save this information here because I may have, it says to enter a treatment plan because I've selected alcohol. I'm going to save this here because sometimes if I'm taking a long time to fill in something here, I could time out. Agencies have a timeout thing. So if they're sitting talking to a client, the system can potentially time out on them. So they would be better off saving at various points if they're having a conversation. I can see that I have a collapsed screen here. If I select expand all, then the screen will expand out. So, okay, so now I have the client has identified as a problem. He declined a treatment plan. And then I would say, okay, what forms of gambling did he engage in the last month? Even if the client is not a gambling identified as a problem gambling user, if he's just a client alcohol and drug, you still have to fill in this one here. This would be a no here, but this one here is still a required field. So you would have to say other, none, unknown, or you would make a selection. And you would make that selection by double clicking and making the option go to the right. When you get to this part here, there is a gambling form. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not, but if you select it, yes, this client is a gambler and he's identified it has a problem for him, or somebody that is gambling and they have identified it has a problem for them. This form here is required. So this one here, you would save it and you would pop into another screen and you would fill in the options on that screen. If you don't fill in this screen here, or you don't complete this field here, this is where it comes back to the business rules. This is where everything is intertwined. If you don't complete the form and you don't select this, you won't be able to discharge the client. So it would come back here again and again and again. And I know that we're doing interface agencies. So this is where this is important to know, because you're not going to be able to discharge their business rules that are locking them in place the same as a regular Catalyst user or people that use Catalyst for their submissions. So right now we're going to leave that for now. When we come down to the health status problems, we're still talking required field data. And when we say yes, that doesn't mean to say that I'm using reading glasses. This is somebody that might have, they're basically or technically maybe legally blind or some sort of other vision problem that causes them problems. And, it's more than just I have reading glasses. Mobility, again, is more than just having, oh, you know what, I broke my arm or I broke my leg. This is somebody that is actually struggling because they have like maybe they're in a wheelchair or something like that. Hearing, same idea. So pregnant, yes or no. And that's important information too. For males, it would be not applicable. It would automatically complete here. For overnight hospitalizations in the last 12 months, we're not talking about, oh, I went to the hospital and I stayed 5 nights. That's 5. No, that's not 5. That means, say, I went to the hospital, I had a duration there, I was discharged, and I went back in again on another date and time. So that would be considered 2 visits or 2 overnight stays in a hospital. For diagnosed with a mental health problem within the last 12 months, we say no. Then in lifetime, yes, maybe they have. And these here are automatically populated for agencies as well, but they can add and remove for these lists here. It's not a required list, listed item though. If I say yes for this first one, you see yes is automatically populated. And that goes on through. You can't say no here, yes here, and no there, because the logic and the business rules won't let you do that. So then we come all the way down and we have health conditions problems. I can save at this point here so that I may not lose my information. They're going to pop up a message for me. And I can expand all of this just so that I can keep going. And again, I'm saving just so that I don't time myself out. Health conditions problems, this is not a required field. It's optional. Agencies can use it if they're using Catalyst to give them what they want, more than just the statistical data that we require. Methadone opioid substitute. There are treatment programs for methadone, and there's other treatment programs such as Suboxone. If they have a methadone, like replacement therapy, then it would be yes, or if otherwise it would be no. It's, for some agencies, they like filling in the prescriber because they track this information in case they need to have it. And then, of course, they can track the prescription details. Custom fields, these are fields that, as we noted in the administration module of customization, these are fields that agencies can set up for themselves. So at this point, I've got the client information. I have a chart number. I have this admission status right now, which is pending. I have the postal code, I have the city, and I have the county. If I need to go back and update that from the client information screen, then I would basically say, okay, I'm going to change the name, or I'm going to change the and save this, change the postal code. Then I would, before I can go to the admission list, let me see, go to the admission list. My screen has changed. You see the postal code did not change. I would have to link that corrected postal code to the admission before you see it changed. And I would go through here and I want to say yes. And let's see here, I'm going to link that to this admission here, and I'm going to say save it. And then I'm going to close this here. So now when I go back to my admission list, I have my admission list. I do have an admission list. There's 0 programs. I see that this is the first admission. And I see that since I've linked my postal code change to this admission, I now have it updated in the system. So I'm pretty good here right now. I still haven't admitted this client. I could move into a supplementary form, which is not a good idea because supplementary forms, you need to have them linked to an admission. Referrals, you can add another appointment from the screen or you can add a case note. I'm going to move on to the program screen. And I want to add a program for the client. And here in this screen here, now we see that we have the number, we have the admission. If we click on the admission number, we go back to the admission screen. If we click on the client demographic or the client name, we go back to the client demographics. I'm going to select a program, and this program here, let's see. I'm going to select this one here. No, I'm not. He's going to select one here. That makes sense to me. Okay, so we have the client now. When I selected the program name, it brought me in the service category and it brought me in the functional center. I still need a site number and I need a date to start this program. I don't need the start and time because this is not a residential program. If it were it's going to self-populate once I click save. But if this were a residential agency, they would be required to put in a start time. I don't need a program worker name. Now, as you can see on the admission screen, this field was called primary worker. Here it's called program worker. Somewhere else it may be called caseworker, but it's all the same from the admission selection list maintenance. So we're not going to worry about that. We don't need any of this information. We can see that this program service summary field is grayed out. It's grayed out because this is linked to the activity log. If this was a black 00 and a black 00 here, if this were all black as opposed to grayed out, that meant to say that the program is not set to auto-calc from the activity log.
Marie, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
You were saying
You're really hard to hear, Nita.
Oh, is that better?
No, you got to come closer to your mic so I can hear you better.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, I'll try.
Is that better? I just wanted to ask why why are the names different? Like, why is it program worker for one and
I don't
uh
know. That wasn't my
what
decision. That was all set in place before I started working at this level. Um,
okay.
it was something that I I
But you were
can't
saying
tell
they're the
you.
same.
Pardon?
They're the same though.
In some ways, yes. But this one, the one that's linked to the admission is the admission level. This one is program level. And I guess when you get into the activity log, it could be like a caseworker level. Like, I think there must have been some reasoning behind it. And maybe if you go to the data dictionary, which maybe Olga can comment further on, but I don't even think it's defined there. I think it was one of those things that was based on each level of where the client was in their treatment program, but I don't have any other explanation for it other than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So, and here we have custom fields that are on the screen here. These custom screen here, just want to let you know, um, this here is linked to the early childhood development incentive, the STAR ECD, and possibly the STAR MMT as well for pregnant and parenting women. So these here would have to be completed, and this would go in conjunction with a supplementary form as well. When this initiative was rolled out, we had so many custom fields on the program screen and so many on the supplementary form. I don't know if they're still collecting this information, but it's there and agencies could be still filling this in. The thing with it being on this screen here, we don't have these locked down, so agencies could actually go in and change these, or they can delete them. I think we're at the maximal allowable custom fields for the screen, so they would not be able to, I don't think they would be able to add another custom field to the screen without deleting one of these, but these are directly linked to an initiative for the ECD and the MMT. So again, we can add a case note here, we can save. And it's telling me that this is the first program registration in a dysfunctional center. Do I want to add them to the wait list? And I'm going to say yes, let's put them on the wait list. We're basically going to put the client on the wait list, and I can do my caseworker. Again, here we have another primary worker, program worker, and we have caseworker. So again, like I said, you'd have to go back to the people that actually developed this to have why they had so many variations on the same selection list option. Because Bonnie is in the program, we're actually adding her to the wait list, and we're also taking her off the wait list at the same time. This gives us our statistics for the OHRS report. And we know that she had 0 wait time because she came in to the program on the same day that she was registered in the admission screen. So we can close this. We know that she's received service, or she's about to receive service, because basically when you open a program, you should have direct service activity on that very same day. We can close this now, but I just want to draw your attention to the fact that this is saying receive service. If it's received service, you will not be able to edit this in the waitlist module. You will have to delete the program before we could remove that status. For some of the other statuses, if you want to divert just for a second here, let's go home and we can go to our waitlist information here. Some of these waitlists here, you come in, oh my goodness, what did I do here? Oh, here we go. So we see this person here, we see this client is active on the wait list. I can take this client off, or I can make an edit. Say I made a mistake on this one here. He didn't actually come on the wait list on the 28th of the 1st. It was actually 28th of the 1st of 2017. I can still edit this because the client is active. If I open this up here, I can see that the client has received service, and anything that's received service, you can't access it. You can't change any information here. The only way you're going to get clear of this information is at the database level or by deleting the program. But as you notice one over here, the client was removed at program deletion. I can still edit this information. I still have ability to edit that information because it's not the same reason. So like I said, we're coming back to the business rules of Catalyst. And like I said, it's very linear. Sometimes you can do one if the other thing is done. So let's go searching for Bonnie again. Let's go looking on her name. And I'm going to say, let's see here, search on both things. And I've got two people that are hitting that mark here. We have a Bonnie and we have a Barbara. We're hitting on the first name and we're hitting on the match of the, and this one here is obviously not the same, but it's obviously a SoundX result. So I don't like that long number there. I'm going to take this one out and I'm going to put it in. It has 99997. And I'm just going to take note of that in case I need to come back and look at it. You notice I can make that edit because I have agency administrator status. If I just had agency user status, I would not be able to make an edit on that number. I can then save it. If we were central access, or if we were doing a screening for other services, like this would be Central Toronto Central N, then I might have access to some of these. The associated client is, are you guys familiar with associated clients? Those are, say, this one here is Bonnie, and Bonnie has her father and her son in the same program. I can actually associate Bonnie to those clients if they're in the system as well.
I was going to say that it's relatives, probably. Can it be anybody else but relatives?
I can't hear you. Maybe it's my headset. Let me just turn mine up a little bit. Maybe that was me, guys. Sorry, Nita. Sorry, Olga, but I had my volume down low. Sorry, go ahead again.
Associated clients are relatives. Can it be somebody else but the family?
Well, let's go have a look. I want to add an association to the client, and I can see what I have here for options are the aunt, brother, caregiver, care recipient, employer, employee, former significant other. So there are options that you can use, and it's an extensive list because this one here is the one that you would want to play a particular focus on. And again, we're talking back to the business rules. So say, for example, you have your unique identifier, which is the initials, date of birth, and their gender. And you're coming up on your duplicate client list that there's duplicates in your system, which we don't want because it affects your data quality. How can we bypass that? And this is where we came up with an option here. Say Bonnie is twins. And who's her twin? Let me do a search here, and I'm going to say, and just do a search, and we're going to say Barbara Walsh is her twin. So now we have, we're going to do the twin. And we're going to say save. Oh, this one's not going to let me do it because it's, like I said, we're talking about business rules. I randomly selected Bonnie, Barbara, but they have to have the same date of birth to be linked as a twin. But once I do that linkage, and I run my duplicate client report again after an overnight refresh, those two people wouldn't show up on the report again because they are identified as twins. Make sense? Okay, so let's go on now. We're still at the print.
Not really.
Pardon?
Kinda, not really.
Okay. Okay. Let's go back to Bonnie. Her date of birth is 1970. Let's go search for somebody else with 1970. So now we have all kinds of people with here, say with 1970. Alex, is that a female, male? It doesn't matter. Bonnie, B71. That's the one that I just opened. Anyway, maybe I'll try to explain it better. We have a report that runs for duplicate clients. when I run my possible duplicate client report, Bonnie and her twin are going to show up because their data's key number, BO, which is Bonnie and 1BO, 1970.
Why would it show up as a duplicate though? Like, wouldn't their names be different?
It's based on the initials. It's basically on most often the data's key. So say if Bonnie came in and her name was spelt like this, Barney. And so I would have Barney 1 and her data's key number is going to be the same. So we'll say, oh, well, gee whiz, when John did the intake, John made a mistake. He didn't hear Bonnie, he heard Barney. And he put in Barney as the client's name. So now we have a Bonnie and we have a Bonnie because the client search was not done well. So therefore, we're going to have a duplicate client or a possible duplicate client. So when you're doing the duplicate client reports, it focuses in on the data's key. It may also focus in on your date of birth or similarities in the name. It may have the same last name at birth initial or the same last name at birth, but a different first name. They tried to narrow it down. I recall one time where this guy came into the agency and he used his twin brother's information rather than his own because he didn't want his name to be on the system. He put his brother's on. So then when his brother showed up for treatment, there was a duplicate. So you know what? It just alerted. You go back and you fix your data because they were obviously two different people. But sometimes people will give you, or it may be misheard. So you have the option basically of running the duplicate client report, identifying the clients. If there are two people there that are actually twin, they're not the same person, then you can make that association with them. Once you do the association, then they're not going to show up on the report anymore. Make sense? So we now have gone from our Bonnie, from the client information to our admission. We added our admission, and we've added the program. So now if we were to look at the admission data, we see that she is open. She's no longer pending, she's open. And I can go into the information here on the program list. I see that she has an admission, I see that she's open, and she has a chart number. But if I were to go in here and look, she still doesn't have any client data associated to her. And she doesn't have any supplementary forms, and there's no case notes. Oh, bless you. So let's quickly go add some activity for Bonnie, and I can access the activity log from here, so that's what I'm going to do. And quickly put in some data here. And you notice here, because I took this client right from the program screen, it pre-populated the individual appointment information. So I didn't have to go searching for her. It automatically populated the information. It gave me her admission number, her program number, and the actual time spent, which is linked to the first service provider in this line here. The scheduled activity duration means nothing. Basically, they say that for the assessment, you can schedule 30 minutes on average, which is probably inaccurate in itself, but it just gives a blocking time in the scheduler for people if they're looking to book somebody else another appointment. It means nothing, anything other than that. Basically, what you're concerned about here is the actual time spent. And this number here is then transferred down to the actual time spent for the client. If I were to click Save Now, that would be all well and good. But you notice that I can't click on the MOH number and I can't click on the functional center number. And that's another business rule that we have, because this program here is linked to a functional center and a service category. So the business rule applied to this one here is that the activity is now going to be directly related to this program. If I were to talk OHRS language for a second here, what you put into the activity log is what's going to get translated back into the OHRS report. So if I were to look at this, take it a step further here and say, I'm going to use Anna again, and I'm going to use Boris, who let's do assessment. So we basically have, now 3 service providers, we have 1 client, and we have 1 program. And we have a program that is community treatment based. So if I were to look at my OHRS report, I can see a number of functional statistical accounts that are going to be applied here. And what you see in the activity log, like I said, it translates back into the OHRS report most often. Most of the statistical accounts do. So I can say, okay, my SPG for this one is SPI. It's not a group interactions because we don't have a group going on here. We have 3 facilitators or 3 service providers in 1 individual session. So these 3 service providers are going to show on the service provider interactions SPI has maybe it would be helpful. Would it be helpful or would it be too diverting if I pulled up an OHRS report?
I think diverting for me now. Maybe we can do it the next time.
Okay.
Just so we can kind of put them together because it's making sense, but I just don't want to.
Right. Okay. So basically, if I were to look at my service provider interaction here, I can see that I have an interval of 1 to 30 minutes. So that's 1 interaction, and then actually 2 because I have 2 within the same service provider interactions too, and then I have 1 beyond that, 45 minutes. I have a visit. This was the first visit in the for this client in this day. If there were 2 visits for this client in the same day, we would only count the 1, but we have 1. So now we have a count on visits. We have a count on the individual served in the functional center for the reporting period. So there's a lot of information here that is going to get translated over to that OHRS report. So say, for example, I applied this if Bonnie were in a case management program as opposed to a community treatment, and I selected the wrong program, then the statistics are going to relay back to the wrong functional center. So we can save this information here, and it's going to tell me that I've saved the information. I don't need anything more. I'm going to come out of my activity log. I'm going to, you have to stay within the buttons. I wouldn't use my browser buttons. Let's cancel the screen, and I'm going to go back into it again. And now you can see I have direct service, I have total sessions of 1, and I have no indirect service. If I didn't have anything in the direct service field right here, I would not be able to terminate this program. So right now I'm going to move to terminate this program. And I'm going to say that's good enough for me. I need a reason for termination. The client came, she didn't need the service. Do we need to follow up with the client? None of those things are required. Basically, you can do an outcome, but I have the information that I need. I spoke with this client. We had 3 facilitators in the same session with this client. She really didn't need services. Or maybe they were, maybe we did a brief assessment, and we found that she needed to be discharged and go directly to detox or residential. For some reason, this lady has completed her treatment plan. So we would basically fill in the required fields. If this program here were not linked to the service category or functional center, then you would see the same information. But if the program was not linked to the activity log, then you would have to fill in this information. So let's save this now. So now we have program status is saying closed. we have an open admission. But I want to discharge this client. She doesn't need to come here anymore. So I have to go back first because I want to fill in my referral information. If this were a referral, electronic referral, I would be able to refer to one of these people here that are not highlighted. We don't want to do this because this is in production. We don't want to cause a problem for these people not understanding the data they're receiving. So basically, I can do one referral per referral screen. I can do referral to a participating agency, a referral to a non-participating agency, or I can do other referral information, which is often an internal program. This referred to, you can populate those fields from the administration selection list maintenance screen for referred to agencies. I'm just going to select, I'm saying I'm referring this client to residential treatment. Then I need a date. Today's date is working for me because we did all of this today, this afternoon. And that's all I need on this client. So now we have the client registered in client info. We have the admission. And we're going to try to discharge this client. And again, we're still talking about business rules and how they apply. So let's go and discharge this client. We're going to use today's date again because it's working for us. And I don't need the timeout because this is not a residential agency. And I'm going to say the client completed the service plan. As I roll down, I can see that we made a referral. We had the client in a program. She had one session and 1/3 of an hour. And we had made this option here is put there for agencies that have not made a referral. They wouldn't be able to discharge without it, but we made a referral. And we're going to say save. And you see this alert here? It's telling me that I didn't complete the gambling form, another business rule. So that tells me this is not going to save. I need to go back to my admission screen. I need to come back to my gambling section because it tells me I had identified this client as a gambler, and I didn't complete this field, and I didn't complete the gambling form. So I can go into the gambling form and say, your own difficulties related to a family member, stop here. So I don't have to fill in all of this because I'm not the person with the gambling problem or identified as a gambling problem. If it were your own problem or your own gambling problem, then you would continue. If you're both you and the person that you're working with or your significant other or family member have a problem, then you would continue on and fill in this form. We won't go into the details of this one here because we don't need to. The agencies should be well aware, so we've saved that. And now we're going to go back. So now we can try to discharge this client again. And hopefully they're satisfied that the information has been saved. We're good to go because we have program information, we have a referral, and we're going to say save. So now we have gone from having no status because this client only had client information. We've gone to the admission where the client was pending. We moved from the pending status to registering the client into a program which created an open status. And then we terminated the program and we discharged the admission, and now the client status is closed. Questions?
Marie, can you repeat for me if you explained already? You gave the client 3 activities, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes. Why she has calculated only 1/3 of an hour?
Because we're talking about the client services that the client received, not how many people participated in the session. If this, you've hit on something that has been a problem in when it comes to groups, because when you look at I don't want to go down the path of reports because a lot of our information used to be based on one very important report. It was called the PRO7. And the PRO7 is one of the reports that we pull for what we used to pull primarily for our data quality reviews. So in a group, a client, you could have 10 people in a group, you can have 10 hours or 1 hour, then it all equates down to how many people are in the group. There's all this information, statistics are in the report documentation, so I'm not going to go through it because let's go, but when it came to our DQ reviews, we found out that the client was sitting there for an hour. So that client really was in the services for an hour. So for the DQ review, we actually we changed all of this information. Well, for that one review that we do, we identified that the client. Here we go. Here. We were using the averages on for that report, and we needed it to come back to actual time. How long was that client sitting in that session? And that client was sitting in that session for an hour, or in this case here for 45 minutes. But when you're looking at that, it comes down to, let's go back to that client. Let's go back, because you've hit on a really good thing. So we see here that the client had 1/3 of an hour. So we go to the activity list, and we're going to select this activity service provider here. She had pre-entry services, which we put in. That would go to another statistical count for that service provider, for that functional center. But when we come in here, this was when the client was open. When you see client services direct, this is the client is open. She has an open status. If you can only see pre-entry here, that tells you that the client has not yet had their registration into a program. When you look here, we could have changed this here to 45 minutes. But we didn't. If we had changed this to 45 minutes, it would be reflected on the client appointment on the program screen. Let's just save it. And then we'll go back to this here. And let's cancel this. And let's come back into it again. See, it's now 75 minutes, 3/4 of an hour. But
okay, I understand. Can I reiterate, making sure that I understand?
Yeah, and just to add one more thing, what this one here is picking up is the first service provider interaction at the top. Unless you change it, it's going to reflect this first one here.
Okay.
Make sense? That's it?
Yes.
I think
okay.
Unless you have questions, I think that's an hour, and I think that's a lot. Like I said, unless you feel there were a couple of things I would have liked to have touched on with you. I know reports, Catalyst reports. Maybe we can quickly pop in here for a second. Basically, what you've seen is just a flow of the client from pre-entry, collecting the information, to moving through a program and then being terminated from the program, discharged to admission. In here we have our folders, and we're going to go to the folders for basically all the folders that are here. Agency directors, agencies wouldn't see this one. Depending on their privileges to reports, and depending again on their setup, like this one here has the interface reports set up, they wouldn't be able to see some of these report folders here. But for the majority of agencies, like privacy, they wouldn't have it unless we've given them the user privilege to it. So if I want to see what clients were in what program, then I would run a client report. Or if I'm doing something for a client, I want to see client names, I'm going to run a client report, unless it's a details client report for one of the others. Data checking reports, those are finding the unknowns and correcting the unknowns. The data quality tools folder, again, that's something that is very specific. Program agency reports. Basically, if I want to see who's in a program or what programs are run for this agency, the agency can run their list of programs, and a list of programs will come up, and it will tell them basically what programs are set to AutoCalc, what the flags are. So sometimes when the agencies want to change something, it's good to refer them back to another report. So clients by program report, pending, who's pending, what entry services were provided, opioid supplementary forms. And then, of course, the biggie, which is becoming the bigger, is the OHRS report. I really think that this one here should be saying dash functional center level, FC level, so that we can distinguish between them when we're asking agencies to write in reports. This one here, it folds everything into tables according to what functional center it is. This one here provides the details on the individuals. We're hoping to expand this one to include all statistical accounts so that you know when you click into this report is going to provide you a very comprehensive report of what's included in a table and for what period of the report you're running. And then this one here is the program level report. So they can run, say for example, you have 5 or 6 programs that are not linked to functional center or service category. Those programs would be all linked together under one table at this report here, but it will be broken down by program in this report. So it helps get the agencies to get their data information out. Okay, so one report that, and I could keep going on and on and on, so, but like I
Do you
said.
have a little time tomorrow or the day after, Marie? If we could do reports?
Sure. What I would like you to do, though, Nita and Olga, is if you go through this a little bit yourself and you find that you have questions, or even if you go in and just do one client between now and when we meet again, because it's good for me to go through this so you can get a picture of what we're talking, but it's another to sit down and actually do it. So, for example, when you come to the client information screen, why can't I proceed past the city? Why can't I get into a county field? What's missing on the screen and what's the need of all this information down here? List of clients accepted, e-referrals and attachments. That's something, there's so many little pieces to this that we don't use or agencies don't use, but some agency out there could be using it. And, but we focus on just portions of it because like I said, that's the people who are using this extensively are very advanced users, and they're familiar. They've been there from the get-go. They've seen Catalyst raise from just a few, from the original screens to expanded screens to all the business rules that are now in place. And every business rule that's in place, they're there for a reason, and it's because of the issues from, developed over misuse, so maybe dates locked down. One of the issues right now that I'm going to take us off recording. Hang on a second.